Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Emmy.
And welcome back to The Bestiary, Monster Manual A to Z. And this week on The Bestiary, we are talking through...
The Duergar.
The Duergar, Grey Dwarves, related in a fashion to your regular run-of-the-mill hill, mountain, etc. shield dwarf, but rather more nasty and kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, when we were reading over the background of these guys, we were both struck with a deep sense of melancholy. These guys live deep in the Underdark, so take where the dwarves live and just go weep a little bit lower.
A few levels lower, yeah.
Yeah. Really is impressive when you think about it.
It's like, take a dwarf and remove everything that makes dwarves, like, happy, enjoyable, proud, and just leave behind the grumpiness and, quick to anger.
Take away the Scottish accent, take away all the fun. You get weird cavefish dwarfs.
Just look at the art. You've got this weird greyish purple, almost translucent looking skin, the eyes that look like they're just completely white. These are folk that have not seen the sun for generations.
I know. I love the idea of when looking at these guys, describing them as you could see the veins and the muscles underneath a little bit as well. Just because, again, just to reiterate, if you think the dwarves go deep, these guys live underneath that. They spend almost their entire lives completely underground. I know in the description it says that they've lost a lot of their joy and artistry and warmth, the things that make dwarves a little bit more approachable. And so looking at the armor and the craftsmanship, it feels very utilitarian. It feels very simple. Unlike a lot of illustrations of dwarves with that beautiful proud beard and the braids and the styles interwoven into their hair, this beard doesn't look like it's seen a brush for probably as long as this dwarf has been alive.
No, but to some degree you can't blame them for being the way they are. These were one of the many groups of folk once enslaved by the Illithid, mind flayers, and spent generations in captivity being worked by these just irredeemably horrible creatures. And while they did eventually win their freedom, they were left forever changed, very bitter, very defensive, very just
unpleasant,
nasty.
Yeah, I know that the Illithid, whenever they have interactions over generations with races, tend to leave a little bit of their fingerprints behind, and you can definitely see that here in the Duergar. We're not going to go into all the deep stuff that you get in Mordenkainen's. In this particular episode, the Bestiary is going to be covering particularly the Monster Manual. But whatever they touch, they do leave their fingerprints on a little bit. And these guys, from what I'm reading here, were imprisoned mainly in the Underdark, which also has an impact on the creatures that live in it. It has weird, not necessarily evil, just weird magic in it, just weird stuff. So they've got some kind of weird abilities to them, even at a very basic, just standard run-of-the-mill says stats like what we get here in this book.
Yeah, so, I mean, as you say, in Mordenkainen's you do get sort of specific different varieties of these guys, but, as you say, in the Monster Manual, this is just your basic template. But, yeah, they have this imprint, as you say, from the Mind Flayers, from their time in the Underdark, which is not just your regular underground, it is the deepest parts of the world where stuff gets a bit freaky. And so they have the ability to magically increase their size. They can go from a medium creature to a large as an action, thereby increasing their strength and the damage they can do as a sort of inherited ability. They have sensitivity to sunlight because of the amount of time they've spent so far underground. And again, they've kind of born of their indenture to the Mind Flayer Society, have adopted their own slave-based economy. These guys, while being very defensive, very militaristic, they also will capture as opposed to kill and turn people into currency, essentially.
Yes, they have a very interesting sort of society, which is, again, not necessarily described horribly well in this book. We'll probably get to it at a different time. But they have a weird market based on the goods they make, based on the people they capture. They don't have a centralized government as described here. I know we were imagining that they probably live in interconnected city-states with loyalties to each other. They do not like other dwarves at all. Their biggest thing is their territory is theirs, and that they lost so much, and that they were left behind, and that they need to take things back. And a lot of that, again, we keep saying that joy is gone. That ability to have compassion, very much culturally, at the very least, removed. And in here, down at the very bottom, there's this funny little footnote. They have their evil god. We've been debating on the pronunciation of this. Laduguer?
But
We're not 100% sure. Who is a fallen dwarf god who has influence on these guys, but also sometimes Asmodeus impersonates him and just runs along through there sometimes, apparently, I guess.
That one is a bit out of left field, particularly because it's like the last thing you get in the entry in the manual.
No!
It's like, oh, by the way, sometimes they are unknowingly influenced by the Lord of the Nine Hells. Bye!
Yeah, okay, but questions? I have about 10? Okay, fine. But I do think the thing that's very interesting about that is it speaks to me that because these guys are so emotionally devastated, that they're kind of easy to manipulate.
Yeah. When your whole culture is based on that sort of bitterness and desire for not revenge exactly, but just this, in particular, the hatred for other dwarves, this deep-seated feeling of you abandoned us, like the blame almost that is exerted, I suppose. You can really see how a clever and malicious evil influence could worm its way into that kind of society.
I know. I also think that looking at the way these guys are written, you're very likely to also talk to these guys. Again, to an extent, unless you come in guns a-blazing, you might meet a guard at the front door who's like, "What are you doing here? This is our stuff.
Although, funnily, they don't speak common. They speak dwarvish and undercommon.
That makes sense in a way. I mean, if you think about the people they interact with, it's not like they wander around on the top at all. So that could also be a fun language barrier thing to play with. I know the other thing that I think, and it's a little thing that I think is very interesting when you're looking again, this stat block is just an average. I think it's a very important thing to remember when looking at this, that this is just a random selection that kind of sums up most of the Duergar you're gonna meet. They could be very, very different, but this basic stat block sets this guy at challenge rating 1, which says to me, and we've talked about this a little bit before, challenge rating 1 is an adventurer, and that means that you're kind of exceptional already. That's a little bit much. These guys are exceptional.
If this is just your basic version of this society, like, that's not just a guy on the street, as you say, that is equivalent to a first level adventurer, which is not just a dude. It's a person who is in whatever regard that defines them above average significantly.
Yeah. So a whole city of these guys? Yikes. Yikes. Thank you so much for joining us this week on The Bestiary. Have you ever crawled deep into the Underdark through a city of the Grey Dwarves? Tell us in the comments down below. We'd really love to hear your adventurer's story. While you're there, if you like this video, hit the like button. It really does help us out. You can check out all the links for our social medias. And if you want to show us just a little bit more love, we do have a link for our Patreon down below. We love our patrons so much, and we remain eternally grateful for you. You can subscribe. We have some more videos here for you to watch. And join us next week when we talk about elementals.